Hi, I'm Dan Griffin with WinField United, joined by Jason Hess, of course with Heritage Cooperative. We're out here at the West Liberty answer plot evaluating some stocks and different hybrids. So as growers approach harvest time, we're going to encourage folks to get out there and try to understand what they have in their fields by hybrid, by soil type, even within a field, what the stocks look like in different areas. So stock issues in corn can be caused by a lot of different issues. Always they're brought on by stress. So sometimes that's a stress due to disease that we'll talk about in a second, or sometimes that can be just the stress of the year. Lack of water, too much water, lack of fertility, particularly nitrogen, sulfur, and potassium. All of those can play into effect to reduce our stock integrity late season. So how do you evaluate stocks? A good way, the old tried and true method, is the push test. So Jason, demonstrate for us a good push test. So Jason's demonstrating for us the push test. Just give him a good push there, about 8 to 12 inches over, and we're seeing where and if they snap. So we got a little snap there. So obviously we are most concerned with stocks like this that are snapping below the ear. That one's snapping at a node. We'll talk about why that can happen here in a second. But for the most part, oh, Jason got one there. If we're seeing roughly 2, 3 snaps in 10, that's probably nothing to be too concerned about. When we get more of that 4 or 5 range, that's the kind of field we want to prioritize for early harvest, where it may make sense to dry that grain or harvest a little bit wetter in order to preserve the intactness of that field.
And fungicide was really big this year, airplane wise. This is a good way to check to see if the fungicide is doing its job, not just on yield, but on stock quality.
That's a great point, Jason. So the strobularin chemistry within fungicide, that's doing the heavy lifting in terms of the plant health component that we talk about with fungicide. So greener stalks, healthier stalks late season, that is a huge benefit of that in-season fungicide application. All right, so I mentioned earlier that fertility can contribute to stock issues late season. So this is a classic example of nitrogen deficiency, where we see this will start at the bottom of the plant, work its way up. We see that open V pointing towards the end of the leaf, working its way back on the plant. So if you're seeing fields out there that showing this phenomenon in that upper 2/3 of the plant, we know that that is starting to run out of nitrogen, and likely we'll start to see some stock issues on fields like that before we will healthy fields. So nitrogen deficiency, big deal. When we look at potassium, I couldn't find any examples in this field, but it'll actually be the opposite. So the edges of the leaf will start to be necrotic and yellow, and then work its way towards the base of the leaf. That'll also start at the bottom of the plant and work its way up. Potassium is a really important nutrient when it comes down to stock strength late season, especially on drier years and drier areas. We have a few of those pockets around Ohio. That'll be something to watch out for as we're evaluating stocks.
When do you use most of your nitrogen in a corn plant?
So most of your nitrogen will be used from that, V7 to tassel time frame, but that last 25%, that's from tassel to black layer, that's the pounds we really struggle with. So making sure that those are available late season, be that through a side dress application or other means, making sure things are stabilized, that can contribute not only to yield but to stock integrity. Yep. So we went hunting for some diseases out here this morning. Found a couple. The first was PHYSODERMA node breakage. So when you see this black, the rind of the stalk, so that's that hard exterior of the stalk, the white kind of, not mushy, but soft stuff in the center, the vascular tissue, that's called the pith. So when we see a stalk break at nodes with that brown outside, especially when we see the telltale PHYSODERMA leaf blight symptoms on top, we know that that is likely the case here with this plant. So PHYSODERMA node breakage here, normally not a huge issue, but it is something, especially in this particular hybrid, we're seeing roughly 4 out of 10 stalks go down where we did the check. The other disease we saw out here this morning, I'm assuming this is either gibberella or fusarium. I'm thinking it's gibberella based on the weather conditions we've had, but you see the pink eating away at the pith of that stalk. So humid, moist conditions, that's when we tend to see gibberella, which would match this plot pretty well. So this is a more aggressive stalk rot, probably the most common one we see in Ohio. This is probably the one we're going to be watching out for as we're evaluating stocks in 2021.
Does fungicide help that?
So it doesn't help that. We can get better standability, better greening of that rind, but in terms of the fungi that's eating away at that pith, fungicide does not help that.
Is that more of a variety then?
Total a variety thing, yeah, and other factors within the field. So especially when it comes to PHYSODERMA, we know that that is a very variety dependent, hybrid dependent. Some of these other stalk rots, think about drainage. So the poor drained fields, they will tend to have more stalk rot issues. Again, it comes back to stress, right, and fertility. If we're in poorly drained situation, we probably have more denitrification, less nitrogen getting in the plant, especially if we're on a wetter year. So those fields will be more prone to stalk rot issues, especially Jim.
So soil type and drainage should help you understand what variety you need to pick out.
Absolutely, absolutely. But understanding anthracnose is one we've seen a little bit too this year, not in this plot, but that top dieback where you see those top two leaves start to disintegrate away, they'll be brown, the rest of the plant is green, and you see that base of the corn plant kind of be black. That tends to be more of that anthracnose. Don't see any of that in this spot, but we have seen some of that pop up around. Certain hybrids have genes for anthracnose, but not every race of anthracnose. So it's another one that we're going to have to evaluate for. But I wouldn't get caught up in what stalk rot it is really. It's really about, from a farmer's perspective, how well is my crop standing, and evaluating your harvest order. So in what fields does it make sense to go get before you may have some potential issues, and what fields do you know are good to go?